the number of things present.
Yeah.
And I don't know if things like apes ever count with their fingers. If
No,
you'd ever sit, I have no idea. It's
someone's have to tell us.
going down a rabbit hole, but we'll have to have a look at it and find out. But I think that's a nice segue into our next conversation, because you were very passionate about this David Attenborough documentary you watched. So I had to go see what was getting you all worked up. And yeah, fair enough.
Okay, you got it. What did you get then, Az?
Fair enough. Well, like, to be honest, I watched it and I spent most of it just doing this. Yeah.
Smiling.
Yeah, because we're quite aware of this, me and Anne. Like, she's a vegetarian, so she brought a lot of attention to me from that food point of view. And he talks about the idea of going a bit more plant-based and the agricultural costs of eating so much meat like we do. And we've always tried to be very conscious with things like recycling and generally doing our little part to care for the environment as best we can. But he was talking big picture, and it was quite upsetting. And I think the hardest part for me, the bit that got me the most, spoiler alert for anyone who's not seen it yet, go watch it before you get into this podcast, where it showed the numbers turning over for each 10 years or whatever it was, every period of life that he was discussing, and just watching those numbers just go the wrong way constantly. It's heartbreaking, because you know that's not gonna change anytime soon.
Yeah. What I found staggering, which I had no comprehension of, like you're saying about the meat, is 30% of the living beings on this planet are us. 60% is what feeds us. And that was like leaving 10% for the rest of the world. It's like, that really blew my head. And we didn't talk about it at all last week, did we? Because I don't want to.
No, we said we'd hold off. So no.
Yeah, so I'm not eating meat during the week now.
Wow,
I'm not going completely veggie, just because I've had a personal relationship with food over the years, and I've been vegetarian before, and I haven't had the best relationship with food, let's say, and I'm in a good place and a good relationship with food. For instance, I'm eating well and everything like that, so I don't want to completely go, but yeah, I've made a point, like, I don't eat sweets during the week, for instance. Now I'm not going to eat meat during the week.
Yeah, I will say, because that was the only part of the documentary where I bit back a little bit against it, in the sense that a lot of research and studies has been done into what it would look like if we all went vegan, and really the amount of land it would take to plant, the amount of plants that would be needed. It brings its own set of issues, like soil health and all of these problems, and things like pesticides and all of that from eating plants. So I don't know if a vegan diet and going all the way is the solution, but I think something like what you're saying, and we like, I often eat vegetarian just because Anne is vegetarian and we'll have a veggie meal. I don't have a thing where I have to have meat with every single meal, and I think that's a big part of it. Is some people, it's not a meal unless it's got an animal on it.
What I took from it all was this conversation we're saying about meat, is it's just completely out of balance.
Yes. And
that's where the problem lies. And for instance, Laura, my wife, she's been vegetarian, speech marks for a while, but I suppose I would refer to myself in the same way now as a free eater. So rather than a vegetarian, a free eater, and I choose not to eat meat during the week. If we go on a holiday, if we go away, if we're traveling, or like there was some leftovers from the kids' dinner that I took for lunch, it's like, I eat it. It's not like, oh, I'm a veggie, I'm breaking the code or anything.
Yeah, it's like we say it all the time, the balance thing. People are it's just too easy, and people are just so excessive now, and there's no consciousness to it. I think that's the saddest part. The one thing I can't stand is people who eat meat, but they won't eat meat off the bone because it feels too much like an animal. And that for me is like, you've got such a disassociation with your food, because you should know that, yeah, that was an animal and it died for you so that you can eat it.
You were eating a little piggy.
You should come to peace with that. And if you can't come to peace with that, you need to have a conversation with yourself about what you're putting into your body. Because if it has to look like a a blob for you to feel comfortable with eating it, then that's not right, is it? It's interesting. I didn't think we'd get so much onto the topic of diet and vegetarianism from it, but I think it was a huge part of what he was saying in terms of just the damage it's doing to the world.
Yeah, yeah, I think we're responsible in the biggest part for damaging the animal kingdom, the wild, by eating it, basically. That's
Yeah, in
what.
terms of like the action an individual could take today that would make a difference, I think
Yeah,
that would be the most significant one. And it's, again, you don't have to go vegetarian, don't need to go vegan, but you should start becoming a bit more conscious. I don't know if you saw the law that got passed in the UK very recently.
which one?
It's basically meaning now we had a law that was protecting us from having meat imported that had pesticides on it, that had growth hormone and all of this stuff. And that's basically been abolished now. So if you're eating any meat that's from another country, there is now no process it needs to go through to ensure that it hasn't been exposed to
Wow, never knew that.
chemicals. Yeah, it got very quietly put through very recently. So all the more reason that if you're going to eat meat, to, you know, go for free range, to go for locally sourced, to support local farmers, and yeah, not to reach out and just eat the cheapest thing. I think that's what you hear a lot. This is while we're on the topic, people say, "Oh, well, you know, I can't eat this organic chicken because it costs 5 times as much. Why is it so expensive?" And I say to them, your question's wrong. It's, why is that one so cheap? Why
Yeah.
can you buy a whole animal for £2.50? That's not right. You shouldn't be able to buy a whole bird for £2.50. That's the problem. You shouldn't be able to go in a shop and get 8 chicken wings for £2. That's what's wrong, not the £10 for the organic bird. And yeah, don't eat that much chicken. Eat a lot less, but when you eat it, eat a proper, you know, proper animal that's run around and eaten grass and not been pumped full of water and chemicals and hormones.
Yeah, so well, going back to the actual documentary itself, like the message, and obviously, you know,
Yeah.
that's what resonated, and you sort of sit there at the end, taken back by it. But I actually, I really take note and really enjoyed the documentary as a whole. I think it was just so well scripted and put together. I'm sure David Attenborough has a big part to play in that. He's not just the narrator. And then there's a team that we don't know about, you know, from the cameraman to a woman to everything else. But I just thought it was very well put together, because I sat down not expecting to watch that documentary. We were sitting down with the girls to have a TV dinner, and it was like, oh, let's just put on David Attenborough because, you know, you get to see some wildebeest or something like that. And I think that in itself was good, because it caught you somewhat a little off guard. But I thought the whole package of the documentary was so well, pieced together. So it started with him, you know, basically saying why we should listen to him, because he's 90 whatever years old. He's traveled the world however many times over, and he's seen in his lifetime these things happen. And then he did give the doom and gloom, you know, he gave, and like you said, those numbers were going up. But what I thought was really good about it was it got to a point where he then changed that, and they gave the examples of the fishing. So, for instance, where countries are now designated no fish areas, all the fish have come back, and it's actually helped populate the fishing areas. And he started to give off more examples, and you know, it finished actually quite positive, in the sense of, you've got to do something, but this is where we can be, with actually quite little effort. And looking at the guy and listen to him, it's like, we need something, like, he probably never would want to do it, or the right person anyway, but we need people like that in political power, that will, you know, understand a problem, and then look to fix it in a constructive way, rather than just sort of, in my opinion, they're just sort of trying to get each other down all the time.
Yeah, very much so. The great part of it when he's speaking at that summit, and the
Yeah.
woman who's leading it, and she says, "You could